Hey everyone, welcome to Tools 101 with DM General. As you can see, today's topic, hammers. Now before we get into this, please make sure no matter what you're doing, you're being safe, okay? Now safety could be where you place yourself, how you use things, and even what you're wearing, all right? What you're wearing will go under what is called PPE, personal protective equipment. And that also can include things like hard hats, safety glasses, earplugs, respirators, gloves, safety toe shoes. All those things are considered PPE. So please make sure that whatever you're doing, you're always being safe. Now, going over hammers, always remember something. Hammers are part of the human experience since the dawn of mankind. We've used hammers for just about everything. All right, and before it used to be something that, a stone that we found on the side of the river or a jagged rock we found in the forest to accomplish some kind of goal whenever we picked them. We have graduated. We have graduated from using stones and rocks and sticks to these. And it is amazing what you could do with hammers. So now, when you're going over a hammer, let's just say this is for our average DIY, our apprentice who's going into the trades, or somebody who's looking to upgrade their inventory of what they have. You may be wondering, what kind of hammer do I need next? Or what do I need to do the job that I have before me? So, right here, number one, this is your regular hammer. This is about 16 ounces, okay? This is your regular everyday hammer. When it comes to your average homeowner or your apprentice or your DIYer who's just now starting to use their hands on stuff, this is probably the first hammer you want to get because this hammer has a plethora of functions, okay? In order to understand these functions, you have to understand the anatomy of a hammer. So when you're looking at it, and I'll put a picture up, this top portion is the head of the hammer. This part of the hammer is used for the business portion of the work you're doing. So this part right here, you want to always make sure that you understand the head of the hammer. This front part right here, this is the face of the hammer. What connects the face to the rest of the head is called the neck, all right? On either side of the head are the cheeks of the hammer. Okay, just like your face has cheeks, on either side of the head, they're cheeks. Okay, this top portion right here, because this is a wooden handle, this top portion driving all the way down to this bottom portion of the head is called the eye of the hammer. All right, it may not see, but it's still the eye. All right, now this back portion of the hammer is called the claw. This is a claw hammer, so it will be called a claw. But it does not mean that every hammer is going to be called a claw hammer. Other hammers will be called, for other hammers, it will be called the peen, right? P-E-E-N, P-E-E-N, peen, okay? And yeah, that's for that part of the hammer. The peen is actually used for a lot of different uses. It all depends on the type of hammer. For example, like the ball peen hammer will have what would look like a joint at the back end of the hammer, and that's for bending metal, and or putting curves on metal. There's so many different types of hammers out there. So please know that hammers have many different uses. Going from the top portion here down to the bottom, this is the handle, okay? And you may say, duh, Steve, like I can see that. But believe it or not, from this side onward is to the bottom, it's called the grip, okay? This is to ensure that you have the appropriate amount of hold on the handle of your hammer so you can deliver the right amount of business to what you're working on, all right? You don't want to have too much grip. You don't want to have too little grip. You want to have just enough so that way when you're striking a nail or striking some wood or metal or whatever it is you're working on, you want to make sure you have the right amount of hold so that way you're delivering the right amount of power. Now, looking at some of these hammers, I have 4 claw hammers here. I have 2 framing hammers and 2 curved claw hammers, okay? What separates these framing hammers the most from these claw hammers are the height. The height of these hammers differ greatly. You can see when it comes to these 2 hammers that these curved hammers, just your regular average hammer, is a much shorter hammer than your framing hammer. Framing hammers are also heavier than your claw hammer and the average claw hammer, and they also have a straighter claw. This is mainly for chiseling, pulling out nails, chiseling, and for prying. When you're prying major structural members and you need a little bit of that oomph to get that thing put in the right spot, this is what you would use. So this helps greatly. This particular framing hammer compared to this framing hammer, this particular one has a milled face compared to this one that has a smooth face. The milled face is so that way it grips the nail well, so the nail does not slip. Nails are actually a softer metal, believe it or not, and this milled face will actually make an impression on that nail, so that way it grips the nail well and is able to drive the nail further into the wood. This particular hammer also has a nail starter on the head. All right, this nail starter has a magnet, so it holds the nail in place. And what you use it for is that you tap the wood that you're working on with the nail. The nail will obviously protrude past the face of the hammer. You tap the wood that you're working on, and the nail will get stuck in place. So that way you don't have to use your hand to hold the nail. And when you're doing that, you can then strike the nail and you can drive it home without even having to use your hand to hold the nail in place. So it works great. Comparing these two, also you see that this framing hammer has much more prominent cheeks than this one, so that way you can actually do a side strike on whatever it is you're working on, so that way you can move whatever material it is you're moving or adjusting. All right, like I said, every hammer has their purpose, so you always want to remember that. This particular hammer right here, I thought at first it was an electrician hammer, but it's not, because the neck is not long enough. However, what you will know is that electrician hammers have a longer neck, okay? And that's so that way you can get the hammer into certain locations that may be a little more difficult to reach. Also, electrician hammers have non-conductive handles to ensure that electricity does not go through the head down to the electrician, causing massive electric shock and or electrocution. We don't want that happening. That can be bad. So always remember that. The advantage that these curved claw hammers have over your regular framing hammers that have these ripping claws, right, is that this curved claw is able to remove nails with little to no damage to a finished surface. So let's just say you have, like a regular homeowner, you have some door trim that you're removing some nails. You don't want to use this framing hammer to remove that nail from the door trim. If you plan on reusing that door trim, you want to make sure that you're using one of these. Why? Because these are less likely to damage the surface. So that way you can actually get the nail out and drive it back in or whatever it is without causing too much damage to that finished surface. Okay. This hammer right here is the club hammer. This is the miniature version of the sledgehammer. It is great because for its weight, you can wield it in one hand, but just know this still packs a punch. So always make sure you're being very careful when you're using this to drive things in. You can use this to drive stakes in a lot. Sometimes some folks may take this camping because you can drive stakes in far down into the ground. You can use this to drive in small fence posts or things like that. Let's just say you have large property and you don't want to carry this big guy right here all throughout the property knocking in fence posts, and you don't have more sophisticated tools. This is your friend that you can carry on you to drive that in. And the way that the handle is, you can still fit this inside of a hammer loop on your hip, so it's easy to carry around with you. So always remember that. This right here, this guy right here, is called a dead blow hammer. Dead blow hammers are known for not having so much recoil compared to your regular hammer. So you can use a dead blow hammer and hit a piece of wood, and you will notice that the hammer is less likely to bounce back, because inside the hammer there's sand. And some of these hammers also have ball bearings. This is used to absorb the force from the recoil, and thus it makes it harder for the hammer to bounce back when you're striking. This helps you deliver the full force of what you're trying to deliver to the surface you're working on. And considering the material that a dead blow is made out of, you're less likely to cause damage to the surface you're working on. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't cause any damage, you're just less likely to. So just keep that in mind. Now let's look at this guy right here. You might think, oh, this is another hammer, because you might think of Thor. No, this is not a hammer. This is actually a mallet, okay? Mallets are actually different from hammers, mainly due to the fact they have much larger strike faces, okay? They're not made for things like knocking in nails and things like that. They're mainly used for making adjustments to whatever surface you're working on, and it covers a lot of surface area, mainly because the face is so large. Mallets, that's really the biggest thing that separates the two. Also due to the fact that mallets are usually made out of softer materials. So make sure that when you have a mallet, you know what you're using it for. It also is less likely to damage what you're working on. So if you're working on wood and you're pounding away at the wood, just know that it's less likely to damage it. I've seen a guy using this doing hardscaping, and he was putting in some pavers for a walkway. This is what he used. It had a much larger face, so he was less likely to cause a pinch point to cause a crack on the paver when he was setting them in. And literally, like, the pavers were still standing, well, not standing, but they were still nice, level, and in place, simply because he used the right tool for the job, this mallet, okay? These could come in wood or rubber. Believe it or not, that's actually soft. Just also be careful too when you're using, especially a rubber mallet, because this will bounce. It is rubber, so this will bounce back. So make sure you're being mindful of that when you're using it, okay? This hammer right here is called the soft face hammer. Why? You can see that ain't steel at the very front of the hammer, okay? That is a type of plastic, okay? And the same thing is on this side. This is mainly for lightweight work. It's similar to the dead blow and the mallet, but the difference is this, is that you can remove the face, and this works really good when it comes to delivering just enough force to make adjustments to what you're working on. I've seen guys use this for flooring. I have this is part of a flooring kit that I have, where you put this at the edge of the flooring you're working on, and you tap away, all right? When you tap away like that, you're able to deliver a wide amount of the force to a wide amount of area to flooring, to bring in your flooring, and that way you don't have to worry about swinging something like crazy just to try and get your flooring in. This works really well, especially when you hit the edges of the floor installations that you're working on, because at that point you can't really swing all willy-nilly. You need something like this so you can get that in. So that's the soft face hammer. This guy right here, this is one of those old school type of hammers. It's not an older hammer, it's not a vintage one, like for example this old vintage Stanley hammer I have. This one right here is an old school type of hammer. It's a drywall hammer. Back in the days, for those of you who do not know, sheetrock, when it was first installed, it was installed with nails, not with screws. So this milled face right here of this sheetrock, of this drywall hammer, was used to knock in those nails. It also has a nail puller, because sometimes those nails don't go in right. So you have this part for a nail puller. This blade right here was used for scoring the sheetrock. All right, back they weren't using utility knives as much. They were using this blade to score the sheetrock. And I mean, these guys were going in. And usually that's all you have to do. Just score along the sheetrock and literally just pop it, and you're able to take it right off. And it worked great. And if you had to, you use a utility knife to score to cut the other side and remove the sheetrock. At least with today's sheetrock. Back in the days, sheetrock, it would just snap. Well, when you scored it and you knocked it off right, it would usually just snap. But nowadays, you know, they use that. This is not used as often, but it'd be really cool to actually bring these back a bit. This is a brick hammer or a masonry hammer. This is used for brick, block, stone, concrete. This is good for chiseling or chipping away at whatever masonry you're working on, okay? This side right here works similar to a cold chisel. So any of you who knows how a wood chisel works, this is the same. This is similar, but it's not for wood. This is for masonry. So stone, concrete, block, brick, those type of materials. So just make sure that when you have this, you're using it for that purpose. This square head works great because you don't want a rounded head when you're chipping away or you're breaking off a piece of stone, because sometimes that curvature on a curved head, on a curved face, could actually cause further damage into the stone that you're working on instead of just where you wanted it to go. So the fact that it's a stone face works really well because it concentrates that force to that one area that you're working on. So this is the brick hammer, and I love it. I used it actually on my old house not too long before I left, so it's a great tool. Now this guy right here, you might look at this and you might think, oh, this is a sledgehammer, but it's not actually. That's why we have a sledgehammer here. This is actually a bush hammer. This is a hammer that you don't see used often anymore. This hammer is used for creating texture on concrete. Why do I say that? Because if you look, you see on this milled face right here, this large waffle pattern, all right? The same thing could be said when you look at this side, but it's not a large waffle pattern, but a smaller one. This was used to put texture on stone, concrete, brick, well not brick, but mainly stone and concrete, and it stops the surface from being so smooth. It works amazing. But you don't see people using this nowadays because there's more machines out there that actually put the pattern on, that you don't see people really using these anymore. So this is more of a keepsake now. However, it's still great to know about. This guy right here is the sledgehammer. All my DIYers that love HGTV and you love demo day, this is your friend. You can knock down walls, you can you can take down sheetrock, you can do a lot of things. This is the guy you want to bring with you, all right? So just know that when you're using this, it's not just for demo. You can use it for installation. Let's just say you put in a grounding rod because you put in a new electrical system and you need a ground rod for new grounding. This is your guy for driving that in because you need to drive 8 feet of rod into the ground. So this is not just for demo, all right? Well, no matter what you're doing, always make sure you're being careful when you're using these tools, okay? This could actually hurt somebody if you're not careful, so make sure you're careful. So anyway, that's it, guys. That's it for today's thing. I just want you guys to know that as a regular guy, just like you guys, getting into tools, getting into the trades, doing that kind of things, you want to know what you're working with, all right? So pick the tool that you need for the job. Do not go crazy on it. Take your time, learn your tools, work with them, and get adjusted, okay? Be nice in the comment section. If you have other tools that you would like for me to go over, I am more than happy to. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all that good, cool stuff that we do on social media so that way this gets some traction and we can do more videos, all right? And like always, I'll catch you in the next one.